1,000 years ago, the great kingdoms of Asia dismissed the leader of the Mongol tribes as a brute, a man who could not read, who knew neither book nor law, who scraped a living from root and bone. In civilized courts, literacy meant order, power, intelligence itself. Illiteracy was barbarism, a cause for ridicule. As diplomats exchanged heavy scrolls and sealed proclamations, a new system rose, one without written rules, but with its own cold, complex logic. The mistake was fatal. The world's greatest empires thought the absence of written words meant the absence of strategy. But what if the true threat was the mind they could not see, the king they refused to understand? How many civilizations have fallen simply for confusing a lack of letters with a lack of power? Temujin's childhood began with the sharp break of exile after his father's death in the 1170s. The family's world shrank to a single felt tent on the edge of the Onan River. Once the son of a tribal chief, Temujin became an outcast overnight. His clan abandoned him, his mother, and his siblings, leaving them to fend for themselves on the open steppe. The rules of survival were simple and merciless. They dug wild roots from frozen ground, trapped fish in muddy streams, and ate whatever scraps the land could provide. Some winters, the family survived by boiling animal bones for days until they softened enough to chew. There were no books, no written laws, and no elders to guide them, only the memory of stories passed down by word of mouth, repeated around a smoky fire. Temujin learned to watch the sky for weather, to read the tracks of wolves and men, to trust only those who had proven themselves through action. Hunger was a constant companion, shaping not just his body but his understanding of loyalty and betrayal. Every lesson came at a cost. The world he knew was built on memory and spoken promise, not on parchment or seals. In this landscape, knowledge was carried in the mind, not the hand. The deprivation of these years carved a deep suspicion of privilege and a reliance on adaptability. It was a world where survival depended on remembering, improvising, and never forgetting who had helped or harmed you. When the herds vanished and the cold set in, memory became the ledger and promise became the only enforceable law. Across the settled empires ringing the steppe, the absence of writing was more than a technical gap. It was a stain that set nomads apart as something less than civilized. In the courts of Jin China, Mongols were dismissed as Tatars, a word that carried the weight of contempt. Official histories described them as wild men from the north, beasts without books, whose lives revolved around violence and instinct, not law or learning. Imperial edicts boasted of written registers and scrolls as the backbone of order, while nomads were said to know only the bow and the horse, lacking the brush and the classics. Persian chroniclers in Khwarezm echoed this view. The Shah's court called the Mongols Tatar dogs, ruling with the sword because they had no pen, no Quran, no written past. Poets in Samarkand mocked the idea that a people without script could ever threaten a world built on libraries and law. Mongol oral pledges and spoken oaths were seen as empty, fragile things, nothing compared to the permanence of ink and parchment. Even when Mongol envoys appeared at city gates, their words were filtered through layers of suspicion. Written memorials and embassy reports traveled up labyrinthine chains of officials, each stage verifying seals and signatures, each delay reinforcing the sense that only literate societies could manage true power. In the eyes of these courts, the lack of script was proof of inferiority, a blind spot that would leave them unprepared for what was coming. A Mongol envoy arrives at the northern border of Jin China. His words are carried not by swift relay, but by a letter pressed into the hands of a local prefectural clerk. The document is sealed in red lacquer, bundled with the clerk's own report, and dispatched to the provincial surveillance office. There, another official inspects the seals, compares signatures, and logs the document's arrival in a thick ledger. Only after this second verification does the embassy's message continue, now joined by a new roster of endorsements and a summary of the clerk's impressions. In the capital, the Board of Rights receives the growing packet. Rights officials review the Mongol seals, noting their unfamiliar script and the absence of flourishes found on Song or Jin documents. Suspicion lingers. The packet is split, one copy to the Chancellery for censors to check language and orthodoxy, another to the Secretariat for policy review. Only then does the emperor see a summary weeks or months after the envoy's arrival. Each stage is a bottleneck. The system is designed to prevent forgery, but every layer adds days or weeks. In 1211, Genghis Khan's proposal for trade was routed through this maze, taking 45 days to reach the Jin court. By the time a response returned, the opportunity for alliance had vanished. In Khwarezm, border governors detained Mongol emissaries for weeks, waiting for confirmation from Samarkand or Baghdad. A single embassy could stall for months as provincial scribes debated the legitimacy of a seal or the authenticity of a signature. Decisions moved at the speed of paper, not the urgency of threat. While court clerks debated, the world beyond the walls was already changing. In the palaces of Jin China and the marble halls of Khwarezm, the written word was more than a tool, it was the foundation of authority. Imperial edicts praised the power of registers and archives, and they boasted that civilization itself rested on the careful keeping of scrolls and the unbroken chain of written law. To the men who sat on dragon thrones or beneath gilded domes, the act of writing was proof of legitimacy. Their advisors assured them that no true power could arise without script, that history belonged to those who recorded it in ink. Proclamations from the Jin court described the Mongols as beasts without books, incapable of order or lasting achievement. In Samarkand, the Shah's viziers recited verses about the Tatar dogs who roamed without scripture or record, convinced that such people could never threaten cities built on libraries and ledgers. Bureaucrats in both empires trusted the permanence of their own paperwork, believing that the rituals of seals and signatures would protect them from chaos. Year after year, new memorials reinforced this self-assurance. An edict from the year 1224, issued by the Jin emperor, dismissed the steppe invaders as Tatars who roam like animals without cities or records, and urged officials to trust in our written laws and registers. In the Khwarezmian chancery, the Sultan's scribes drafted decrees boasting that our libraries and scribes ensure eternity. The steppe vermin have neither history nor heirs. Within these walls, the equation was simple. Writing meant order, and order meant safety. The possibility that a ruler without script could wield real power seemed unthinkable, a comforting illusion repeated until it became a shield against doubt. Temujin's rise did not depend on written decrees or noble titles. Authority spread through the camp like breath in winter, seen and felt but never captured on parchment. The impression of power was physical, immediate, and shared. The backbone of Mongol power was a new kind of order. Every man from the humblest herdsman to the most seasoned warrior was counted and placed within a strict chain of command. Units of 10, called Arban, formed the smallest group. 10 Arbans made a Jaghun of 100. 10 Jaghuns made a Minghun of 1,000. 10 Minghuns made a Tumen. 10,000 riders. This decimal structure was simple enough to memorize, yet strong enough to hold an empire together. Promotion cut across bloodlines and tribal memory. A blacksmith's son could command 100 men if he had the nerve and discipline. Subutai, born far from any noble lineage, rose from obscurity to lead armies across continents. Jelme, once a fugitive, became a trusted general by saving Temujin's life and never wavering in battle. These men owed their rank not to ancestry but to loyalty and skill proven on the open steppe. Loyalty was not written into contracts. It was spoken aloud at gatherings sealed by public vows and the sharing of hardship. Wealth from raids and campaigns was divided by unit, not by family, binding men's fortunes to their comrades rather than to their clans. The Keshig, the Imperial Guard, drew its members from every corner of the steppe, mixing rivals and strangers into a single household that answered only to the Khan. Even the code of conduct, the Yasa, was recited and remembered, not set aside for the few who could read. This system did not need libraries or ledgers. It needed memory, discipline, and the watchful eyes of commanders who had once stood at the bottom themselves. Orders passed from mouth to mouth, from one Arban to the next, moving as swiftly as a horse at full gallop. In this world, a man's worth was measured by what he did when no one was looking, and the promise of advancement belonged to anyone who could carry the weight. The Empire's true script was written in the lives of those who rose from nothing, and in the loyalty that no parchment could guarantee. In 1204, a captured Uyghur scribe named Tata Tonga introduced a new script to Genghis Khan's camp. The script ran in vertical lines and could be learned quickly by men who had never held a brush. It was simple, fast, and useful. Script mattered in a new way on the steppe. Genghis himself could not read, but he understood the power of written orders. He instructed Tata Tonga to adapt the alphabet for Mongolian speech. Within months, the first decrees and lists appeared, written not for the Khan, but for his growing circle of advisors and administrators. Advisors began to keep records, and the state acquired a new memory. This alphabet became the backbone of Mongol record-keeping, used for tax rolls, orders, and the rare stone inscription. The best-known example was the Chinggis stone, set up by his nephew Yisunge. Writing provided continuity, a way to fix decisions in place and pass them along the relay of command, but writing alone did not set the Mongols apart. What changed the empire's tempo was the invention of the yam, a chain of relay stations stretching across the steppe. The yam turned information into speed. Every 25 to 40 miles, a fresh horse and a waiting messenger stood ready. Couriers rode day and night, handing off messages at each post, covering up to 200 miles in a single day. This was not the slow, layered bureaucracy of the Jin or Khwarezmian courts, where a letter could take weeks to clear official seals. In the Mongol system, a command from the Khan could reach the farthest border in days, not months. Reports from scouts and spies returned with equal speed, feeding a steady stream of intelligence into the heart of the empire. Intelligence arrived faster than any rival expected. The yam's efficiency depended on discipline and trust. Each station was stocked with food, fodder, and spare horses, managed by local families who answered directly to the Khan's officials. Penalties for delay were harsh. The relay system became the veins of the empire, carrying not just orders but news, rumors, and tribute. Tata Tonga's script traveled along these routes, multiplying the reach of those who could read, while the Khan's own words moved by memory and oath. In the capital at Karakoram, literate advisors like Yelu Chukai, a Khitan scholar captured in 1215, managed the growing flood of documents. Chukai's ledgers and censuses shaped tax policy, but every reform depended on the speed and reliability of the yam. The Mongol state moved at the pace of its couriers, not its scribes. In a world where decisions could no longer wait for the slow march of parchment, the combination of script and speed became the empire's quiet advantage. The walls of Zhongdu, the Jin capital, stood thick and high, stone and rammed earth, ringed by watchtowers and deep moats. For 3 months in 1215, Mongol forces encircled the city, cutting off every supply line and waiting for hunger to do its work. But starvation alone would not bring the city down. Genghis Khan, a man who could not read a blueprint, recognized the limits of cavalry against stone. He ordered his commanders to find men who could. Captured engineers, Chinese, Khitan, and Persian were spared when others were not. Their skills became currency. Some were given food, others gold or rank. Those who resisted were threatened with death. Those who cooperated found themselves at the heart of Mongol siege lines. Under their direction, teams of laborers built siege towers, catapults, and giant crossbows capable of hurling stones over the walls. Sappers tunneled beneath the ramparts, using wet hides to muffle the sound of picks and to protect the earth from fire. Blockade and bombardment worked together. Each day, Mongol engineers adjusted the angle and range of their engines, learning from every failed shot. When defenders tried to repair breaches at night, Mongol teams sent flaming arrows to drive them back. The city's defenders, trained to trust in the permanence of their walls, now faced weapons they had once used against others. By the end of the 3rd month, Zhongdu's gates splintered. Famine had already hollowed out the city, but it was the work of foreign engineers, men who could read plans and calculate arcs, that broke the final resistance. The lesson was clear. Knowledge, wherever it was found, became a tool for those willing to use it. Genghis Khan's empire grew not just by force, but by absorbing the skills of the conquered, turning every defeat into a new advantage. From the ruins of Zhongdu, the Mongol Empire expanded with a force and speed that no chronicler could truly grasp. By the time of Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his banner stretched from the Yellow Sea to the Caspian, covering an estimated 24 million square kilometers. No single power in recorded history had ever ruled so much, so quickly, and with so little reliance on the written word at the top. Yet the scale of Mongol dominance was measured not only in territory but in the sudden transformation of the world's trade and communication. The Silk Road, long fractured by rival kingdoms and bandit strongholds, reopened under the watch of Mongol patrols. Caravans carried silk, spices, and ideas from the walls of Xi'an to the ports of the Black Sea, passing through relay stations where a single passport inscribed in Uyghur script guaranteed safe passage. The Yam system, first built for military orders, became the backbone for merchants and messengers alike. Goods moved faster than ever before. A Persian merchant could reach the markets of China in months instead of years. Letters from the Pope to the Great Khan crossed Eurasia on horseback, relayed from one post to the next without delay for seals or signatures. The Mongol peace, Pax Mongolica, brought a fragile safety to highways once haunted by warlords and thieves. Tax ledgers, decrees, and treaties flowed in a dozen languages. But the empire's true power lay in its ability to move people, goods, and information at a pace that left older empires standing still. The world's economic center of gravity shifted. Cities along the Silk Road swelled with new wealth, while distant capitals struggled to understand the source of this sudden, unstoppable current. The Mongol Empire was not just vast, it was interconnected in ways that no parchment or archive could contain. Today, intelligence is measured by credentials, not by consequence. Yet the Mongol Empire's rise proves that systems built on rigid assumptions breed their own defeat. As institutions still favor pedigree over adaptability, the lesson endures. Civilization's greatest threat is not the outsider we dismiss, but the blind spot we refuse to see. Adaptation, not tradition, remains the real currency of power. What blind spots shape our world now? Share your thoughts below.